So I'm Brenda Meldebeck, and I'm a partner at Ater Wynne, and my practice consists primarily of working with startups and entrepreneurial ventures, and my practice is basically centered around corporate formation, corporate governance, corporate finance, and M&A work.
I am David Connell, partner with Ater Wynne. My practice focuses on tax and business matters, and I've had the opportunity to work with Brenda and a number of other lawyers in our office on a variety of matters for, it's been, 14 years now at Ater Wynne.
I think that the value in coming to a firm like Ater Wynne is really that this is our bread and butter. This is kind of the heart and soul of our practice and what we do, and so we know how to do it well. And you really, if you are a startup that has visions of raising money from, sort of conventional VCs or even big angel groups, you want to be formed in a certain way, you want to have your capital structure be in a certain way, you want to have your articles or your certificate of incorporation have certain provisions in it. And so it's really, LegalZoom, while I'm sure it's a great product, just doesn't accomplish that. And what I think the biggest value we add to really early stage formation when somebody is going to go ahead and raise money like that is that we can get them set up in a way that at least eliminates one of the obstacles to receiving financing, which I think is a tremendous value.
Yeah, and I would add that if you go the other route, you will likely, and when you get to the point where you have outside financing or sophisticated investors, you'll likely end up redoing everything anyway. So you'll end up paying twice.
Yeah.
I think.
So it's sort of a short-term cost savings for longer-term spending more money.
The value that we can bring to clients in addition to our legal expertise and that knowledge is really just the experience of seeing a number of different companies go through the process of, from the formation stage to the financing stage to the liquidity event, whatever that may be, and being able to just guide them through that from not only from a legal perspective, but from a practical perspective and a business perspective, and helping them to think through the number of issues that they need to think through. And I think we can really be a practical team member in that sense and provide some practical input that goes beyond the legal stuff.
Definitely. And we also like to try and make connections if people are looking, if they have other needs, we try to help them make introductions, make connections. If they need to round out their management team, if they're looking for a bank, if they're looking for accountants, we try to help, sort of smooth that along, which I think is a real value.
The issue that many entrepreneurs face is, how should they organize their new business entity? And there are a number of choices. The most, traditional choice, if you think you are going to receive, traditional venture capital money, would be a C corporation. There are other choices out there, which are, the ones you typically see are an S corporation, a limited liability company, or maybe even a limited partnership. But typically, if you do think you're going to receive venture capital money, the path you would go down would be a C corporation. The venture capitalists are going to generally insist on that kind of a structure. If you don't think you're going to receive venture capital and it's going to be more of a kind of closely held private type of money, then you may consider some of those alternatives. So I think you really have to ask realistically, where is your financing going to come from? The other issue that we see a lot of people struggle with is, should they form the entity, let's say they're based in Oregon, should they form the entity in Oregon, or everyone's telling them they should form it in Delaware. And they struggle with what's the right thing to do there. You can achieve essentially the same things in your governing documents. We do find, though, that sometimes outside investors, and particularly outside investors outside of Oregon, are more comfortable with a Delaware entity, and just because it's viewed as, most corporate lawyers, wherever they are familiar with their own jurisdiction, and they're also familiar with Delaware. So it's kind of an easy choice from that perspective. The biggest downside of Delaware that I think people need to be aware of is that there is it's much more expensive. There is an annual franchise tax that can be fairly steep. And so you need to have your eyes open about that and ask yourself, is it really worth, the price to pay that tax every year just to have, overcome this potential perception that investors might have about the entity.
There's a lot of discussion, and there always has been a lot of discussion about the use of a convertible note versus some sort of priced round at the early stage. I think people have gone back and forth about that, but I think typically the convertible note really does work pretty darn well for both the company and the investors, because the benefit to the investors is if it's really early stage and not much has been proven yet, they don't have to really try to set a valuation for the company. They get the benefit of, presumably anyway, the next round being more institutional, sophisticated investors who really have the ability to do the diligence and really set the correct, supposedly, valuation. The benefit to the company, frankly, I think also is you don't have to set a valuation at a time when it's really hard to know if you're setting the valuation too low or too high. And we have seen a lot of problems in a later round when the first round has been a priced round and the later round comes in and says that valuation was completely out of whack. We need to cram you people down a bit. Or we're gonna end up with a down round here for no reason except you just didn't price appropriately in the first round. So I think the convertible note, it's not perfect for every situation, but I think it works remarkably well in a lot of situations in early stage financing. And it also has the benefit of being, typically anyway, fairly speedy to do. I think the things I am really excited about right now really do revolve mostly around sort of early stage funding, because in the time I've been here, that's always been a big gap. It's sort of like, yeah, I can use my credit cards to, do a few things, and maybe mom and dad or my friends or what have you. So maybe I can cobble together $20,000, $30,000, and it'll take me a little ways. But to have sophisticated angel investors, and also to have things like the Portland Seed Fund and PI around that are really trying to vet companies, provide some mentoring so that companies get out of the gate in kind of going in the right direction. I think that's really exciting.
I think if you want to see something change in Portland is, the comment you often hear is Portland startups don't think big enough.
Yeah.
And so, but that just, maybe that's just the personality of Portland and the people that are here. But you would like to see people kind of think a little bit bigger, think a little bit more like, scale-wise as people do, I think, in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And to
I
have
think that's true.
that vision. And so that would be one difference I'd like to see.